Welcome to the Courageous Living Podcast, where we learn to exchange our struggles for strength and embrace courage as a lifestyle. I'm your host, Courage Molina, author of Power Principles, Courageous Living, How I Overcame Depression, Saved My Marriage, and Took Back My Life. What's up, y'all? I'm so excited to be here with you guys. I have an absolutely amazing guest for you. Let me give her intro first. She is really and truly, if I'm going to be honest, the reason that I am doing a podcast. She's a huge part of that, and I don't know if she knows that yet. She's an executive brand strategist, podcast creator, and co-host. She's a philanthropist, coach, wife, mother, and in my personal opinion, forget that, not personal, in my professional opinion, she is a sister fire starter. She is gorgeous inside and out, and she just has such a beautiful spirit of light and love. You know, there's really no doubt that she is filled with the Spirit of God. Listen, I'm so excited to welcome our guest, Sybil Amuti.
Girl.
Hey, Sybil.
So what are you trying to do to me today? Let me ask you, what are you trying to do? Because first of all, you just really rocked my world with that full introduction. Your music is fantastic. I feel so excited about this time we're about to have, Courage.
Yes, this is going to be so good. You're not ready. I know in my spirit you're not ready.
I know, but you're going to get me all the way together.
I am. I am so excited to have Sybil, and I'm gonna be sharing so many things with Sybil and the questions that I ask that will probably be the first time that she's heard this. So we're gonna cut Sybil some slack because she ain't ready, y'all. I'm trying to tell you. You're just not ready. So probably in 2016, I met Alicia D. Hey, Alicia. I know she's listening to this podcast. And she said, you need to listen to this podcast. And I was like, I never even listened to podcasts before. She's like, oh, you should listen to this podcast. It's called The Great Girlfriends. I'm like, I don't listen to podcasts. I don't even think I'm not interested in listening to a podcast. She said, just listen. And so I listened. When I listened to one episode, I listened to 10. Okay, I listened to the first one, probably like episode 62. And then I went back to episode 1. And it was the first time I ever felt like, oh my gosh, I want to know these people. I want to know who they are. I want to be in their circle. Wait a minute, these my friends I'm listening to. When am I going to get to hang out with them? And so listening to that Great Girlfriends podcast was something that really sparked a change in me. Sybil, listen, on the Great Girlfriends podcast, you are so yourself. So if you guys haven't listened to the Great Girlfriends podcast, get a life. Listen to the Great Girlfriends podcast. It's going to change your life. What? It is. I just want them to get it together.
I love that. Get a life. And go
get a life.
At thegreatgirlfriends.com. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Who you are on that podcast, like people are going to fall in love with you. That's who you are in person. It's not like, oh, you are talking about sisterhood or you are talking about giving or sharing or being light and love. And then there's a disconnect or that's only reserved for people that you've known for a really long time. I really want to know, I guess I should ask a question at some point. I guess my first question really is, how did you become Sybil, right? This encouraging collaboration over competition, plenty of room at the top, let me give you a hand, let me take you with me type of person, because that's who you are through and through, right? So how did you get there?
Wow. Okay, so you're absolutely right. I've never heard this question before. And I'm completely, courage, I don't know, I'm sure for everyone listening, courage is a way of making your eyes sweat and like swell. It's the air and it's like the word she uses. And it brings you just to this point of emotional tears and really pure vulnerability. When you say all those things, courage, I think back to all the times that I didn't have encouragement and that I didn't feel collaborative, and I felt like there was no room for me at the top and that I didn't have enough power to bring anybody else forward. And I just felt like I was so far from being the person that God wanted me to be that it wasn't even enough for me to even try living. So I think about the times that I wanted to die, and I think about all the hopeless nights that I had, and I feel so much joy because I realize all the work that I've done, in co-creation with God to get to where I am today. So when you say, how did you get to be Sybil Courage? I put in a lot of work, a lot of work. Um, I fought adversity, like my life depended on it, which it did. I quit a bunch of things that didn't serve me and quit a bunch of habits and a bunch of relationships and moved cities, things that were not serving me. And I just kept saying yes to God, and I just kept saying yes and kept saying yes and kept growing curious about what the blessing could open up for me. That it has evolved into this, blossoming, because I still feel like a girl inside. I still feel like I'm still learning, still growing, still meeting myself every day, and still getting to enjoy being Sybil. But I just opened myself up to the idea that the blessing would make life available to me in a new, fresh way. And I just, remain curious about what God has for me. And I keep saying yes to God. Now, it's not always an easy yes, Courage. Sometimes I box with the Lord sometimes. I do because I'm stubborn. And I grew up with a lot of security, like I said, I've told you before. So when it comes to leaps of faith, sometimes I'm like, Lord, where's hold on, give me my parachute. Like, let me know how we going to land this thing, because there are certain things that I'm not ready to just let go. And God, and he always wins, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm the one that's like, yes, Lord, be your will all day, every day. Sometimes I'm like, hold up, God, wait a minute. But it's not a big boxing match. He always wins because he is my father, my source, my director. And I do want my life and my um family to have full surrenderance to God. So it's that curious ambition as a Christian to just see where can the blessing take me? And who can it introduce me to? What type of life can I live if I open myself up, fully expanded heart, open to God just being my oxygen and my source? Where can I live? Where can I be? How can I feel? How can I serve this world? How can I contribute to the kingdom? These are the questions that I ask myself. And those, these are questions that I matured in as I decided to say no to all of the adversity, no to anything that didn't look like God, no to people that tried to pull me down, no to the hurt, the doubt, the rejection, the inferiority, the suicidal attempts, the depression, the alcoholism, all of that, that tried to hold me back and take my life. So that's how I got here. And it's a long, it's been a long road. It's been a long road. I grew up in a family that was very loving, but I didn't feel the love. I grew up, receiving connection from one parent, affirmation in another way, but wanting it differently. So I didn't know where I fit. I'm the youngest of five kids. So I was always trying to make sure I was one of the five. I'm like, I'm here. I'm in. Like, count me in. My sisters bullied me in the most loving way possible. I know it was their love language, but they were total bullies. So I grew up trying to please them, and trying to fit. And I was the tall, awkward girl with the really puffy hair, head full of puffy hair. My mom wouldn't perm it. I had glasses at 5 years old. I was a string bean. So I grew up very awkward and insecure, and I was bullied and all of those things. But something on the inside, which a lot of people will say it's something and will later recognize that God is on the inside, really trying to stir up and remind us that he's with us and that his love is there. And that if we get curious about that something, that little bit of light, that's stirring on the inside, we really can really can just grow in it and illuminate more and more and more. And so that for me was something that I just kind of clung to. I always knew I was smart, but we weren't raised to be pretty. We were raised to be smart, independent, strong girls. And that's how our parents groomed us. And so that's the person I've conditioned myself to be. So looks was never a thing for me. So when people called me ugly, I was like, well, maybe they're right. Because the only people that call me pretty are the old ladies at church. And who listens to them, right? So, that's how I felt. I kind of thought I was cute, but I was like, well, yeah, it doesn't really matter. I'm smart. And that was in our home, that was your strength, was being smart, being kind, and being generous and being independent. So that's how the girls were raised. So that's how I grew up, and that was who I was reared to become. And so when life hit me hard, Courage, when I got hit with rape in college, I didn't understand it because the men in my life always secured me. So for someone to come and do something to me that took away security, it confused my entire system. I didn't know that. I'd heard of rape, but I thought that someone had to come in your back door,
Right.
beat you down, and blindfold you. I didn't understand that a person could know you, be a part of your life and still violate you, because I had never seen that in my life. So I denied it for years, and I drank it away, and I partied it away, still did my work at school, but I partied it away, and I tried every way I could to escape it. But for what God had planned for me, I would have to heal, right? So God knew that we would sit in this moment today, and he knew that I would have to have healed and been set free from that bondage in order for us to share this moment, and for us to even come to the great girlfriends experience, and for me to be considered light. I would have to get rid of darkness. So, I journeyed with God through that. And yeah, so I hope that gives you like a little glimpse into it.
Girl, I have notes all over this
Ah,
paper. Sybil, you are dropping nuggets. I should have warned them. That's my bad, y'all. Y'all should have had your paper out,
you
pause
have to
it,
have pen and paper
rewind
when you
it.
listen to Courage.
Yes, that's my bad. You gotta have pen and paper, my friends. So many great things you said, that just, really amplifies this idea that, if you're going to have what God has called you to have, this thing He has promised you, whatever that looks like, if you're going to get out of the pit, if you're going to get out of the pig pen, if you're going to get into the promised land, you have to fight for it,
Absolutely.
right? Doesn't matter how you got there, right? So I went to this place one time and I heard this guy say, you're either in the pit, the pig pen, on the potter's hands. If you are in the pit, this is something somebody else did to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that violation that you experienced, it was not of your own doing. You didn't do anything to deserve it. They were 100% wrong. I think a lot of times people get to that place and it's like, because I'm not the one who put me here, it's somebody else's responsibility to get me out of here. And it just doesn't work
It
like
doesn't
that,
work that way.
right?
No.
You still have to do the work of healing. You still have to do the work of really acknowledging, really being self-aware of the situation that you are in, or the situation that you find yourself in. I think it's great the way you said that you grew up in a place where there was so much love, but you couldn't receive it. Again, it really comes back to being
Mm-hmm.
self-aware. Sometimes we're making an assessment of our situation, and it seems like everybody's against us and nobody loves us and we don't have any support, when support is all around us. But because it doesn't look like the way we thought it should look or the way we needed it to look, whether we were able to verbalize it or not, now we just completely discount it. You
Absolutely.
know,
And
you can
what's
have
big
great
about
things in
that?
spades and not know
Yeah,
it.
what's big about that, Courage, is that we all have different ideas of love. We all have different desires of love. We have different ways that we want to give and receive love. And we come to the table, even, my parents birthed me fully. Yes, they did. But I still have my own idea of what nurture would look like. My parents loved me based off of the way that they were reared and the way that love was given to them and their expectations of love. So, coming out of the civil rights movement and being, children of farmers and being children of parents who, second generation away from being enslaved, let's keep it 100. Um,
Yeah.
there, my parents were still on a quest for freedom, and so my parents wanted to give their children freedom, and some of the things that I thought I needed were based off of the conditioning of my household. So I grew up with different dynamics than my parents, so they can't understand what I as a child need at all times, and I don't even know at all times. I'm still learning sometimes what love needs to look like. But what I do understand now as an adult, and I take this into my own parenting, is that they won't always get it right. I won't always get it right. But if I default to the idea that the God in me will give my kids enough so that they can be nurtured and go out and be outstanding humans, then I've done my part. Does that mean that there will be hard times? Absolutely. There will be times that I cannot control or contain for my kids. But what I want to introduce them to is God's love, so that when they do come against hard times, they can fall back on God's love and they can feel the security of God's love. And that was something, when I think about my child, my upbringing, and how I wish that my dad would have said more things about me that made me affirmed and kept me away from the boogers, you know, and that I wish, my mom could have given me more of herself. I understand now that with all that she had to give me, she gave it. And that I, as a woman, have to take that torch and I have to enrich and refine so that I can do better for my children. But I don't want to crucify them for that. I want to be honest about what I wanted, but I don't want to crucify them. And I don't want to bind them to the idea that they had to be perfect for me, because I can't be perfect for my kids. And I can't be a perfect daughter now. You understand what I'm saying? And
Right.
so, as someone who desires healing in any broken relationship, I don't care what that relationship is, I understand we are all humans. We bring humanity to the table everywhere we go. And there will be human error in every relationship. And we don't get to control what that error looks like. All we can control is our heart's response. That's all we can control.
That is so good, Sybil. I think, especially when we're talking about parents and giving them the best that, giving our kids the best that we have, even if it looks different from, how we were raised, it also changes, as your kids get older. So the things that I wanted to give them, it was so easy to do. It's very easy to have conversations with my kids when they were younger, because even if you think that you kind of have an open house and your kids can say how they feel and their opinions to you, they start to believe that they can't, right? At some point, they start to believe, like, okay, I know you say I can talk to you about anything, but okay, I really can't. And it's because, not necessarily because they don't think you love them, but because they know you love them and they're worried about disappointing you, because they are concerned about how you are going to receive it or how you will look at them. And that's easier for me to see, not so much as a parent, but as a teacher. So I spent 10 years in the classroom. And as a high school teacher, it was very easy to see, yes, I can see that your mom loves you. Why are you not just sharing this with her? Why aren't you telling her that this is what you need? And it's like, well, no, because I don't want to upset her, or no, I don't want to hurt her feelings. So, and every relationship is like that too. Even if you have the greatest intention, even if you have the greatest motives, the purest motives, and it's all from love that you're giving it to someone, part of communication is the receiver also.
Absolutely.
I know, especially as a parent to teenagers. I mean, I have a young adult. My daughter's 21. My oldest is 21, and there are
That
so many
blows
things.
my mind, by the way. That just completely, because you're 21, so how? But whatever.
Yes, yes, yes. My oldest is 21, and she is coming to a place where she will say things. She will be honest about what she needs or what she's not getting. And some of it is seriously like, it stings. And I'm like, let's go back to a time to maybe where you didn't share everything that you thought. Because some of this stuff is stinging a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Things that I thought I did well, I thought I communicated well when she was a teenager. She's like, yeah, no, that's not, like, you didn't do a great job with that.
Right.
And it's like that in so many relationships. But I think that it does come from like letting your heart and your love for the relationship to be known. Like, above whatever I want you to do or have or whatever, I love you and I am committed.
Yeah.
That
We
is
had a scenario like that with Sam. My son is 9, and we reprimanded him for something, and we were talking about it, and he said, none of it is, at the end of the conversation, I asked him, what do you think? How do you feel? What you take away? And he told me what he took away, and I was like, how do you feel? He was like, well, I don't feel empowered or whatever. I said, do you feel empowered to do better? He said, no. And I said, why not? He was like, well, the way you talk to me didn't make me feel empowered. And I thought I had done a good job, right? I said, oh, this was a 5-star parental conversation. Like, no hands were laid. You're still standing. So I'm thinking it for the win. And he's over here telling me that he felt disempowered by the way that I spoke to him. And, in that moment, Courage, I had to check with God on that. I was like, all right, Lord, I need you to clarify this for me because he's 9 and his expectations of me as a mom are that I always be endearing and that, I always come with roses and petals and flowers and that I'm always massaging his ego and that I'm always giving him everything in the most perfect way, right? And when I'm human, sometimes he can forget that I'm human. And even though I remind them of this often, like, listen, mommy's going to make mistakes, so I apologize to him for what, I said, I apologize to you if I did not empower you by this conversation. But Sam, in this relationship, and this is a straight up conversation, Courage, I said, in this relationship, I'm making room for you and God to have relationship as well as what I have with God, which means there has to be a gap of space where God has to speak to your heart concerning your relationship with your parents, the conversations that we have, all the things that you need to receive from me, and all the things that I need to give to you. God, because in speaking with God, I got clarity that what I did was good. So I said, okay, if I needed to correct myself, I absolutely would. But I also recognize that if I'm perfect in every way, why would he need God? He'd never call on God if his parents were perfect in every way. He would never have to understand the source of the Father. So I need you to see my imperfection and take it to the source. Go to God and ask God in this relationship. I mean, and this is something that we talk to them about constantly, Courage, because I need you filling in the gaps for me, Sam. I'm not going to always get it right. I'm going to make plenty mistakes. I'm going to talk to you sometimes. And I mean, at you versus to you sometimes. We're going to walk away from conversations completely disgruntled. I know we will. But what we need to know is that in these moments, God is with us and that we can each go to God and we can each have conversation with God and he'll give us the peace and the clarity we need so that we know each other better and we don't judge each other for being human. You feel what I'm saying?
Girl, you on here preaching. I feel like I owe you an amen right now. Girl, you said something. Let me just tell you, this is not just between you and Sam, who is so handsome, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
So handsome. You said that something that is great for all relationships. And I have been trying to think of how to say this. Girl, you just did that thing. There needs to be space between us for God to work through the relationship. There needs to be a little space for God. You cannot expect for me to meet you at this place of perfection. And that has to go with every single relationship. Where are we starting from? So if you're talking about a relationship with your spouse, I wrote this book, and this book is really telling a lot about, things that I've been through in my marriage. But one of the things that truly kept me in, I'm like, okay, well, I'm still in, is that I could go to God and have a conversation and say, okay, this is what he has done. And this is how I'm feeling right now. What are your thoughts? Because your girl's packed and ready to go. So if you're ready, Lord, I'm ready. My husband and I have been together for 22 years. We have been married for 17 years. We were teen parents. We started dating in like ninth grade. So, and that sounds so cute. That sounds cute. But what that really means is that we were children in a very serious relationship, doing things that most adults are not ready to do, which means we were crazy people. We treated each other poorly as well. So we've given each other a lot of scars, but it always came back to let me have, because he really tried it. So I'm looking like I'm good. What you saying? Like you have to have that conversation. And I've had, situations like that with friendships, with your cousins, with your sisters, with your parents, where somebody has said or did something that rubbed you the wrong way or was just wrong. There's no question, they were wrong. Does that define them? I think a lot of times we allow someone's mistake or what they said to us or how they made us feel one time, we allow that to define that person, which is unfair, right? It's unfair and it's not a realistic way of seeing people. And so I think having space for God to work through the relationship, girl, I'm gonna use that on everything. Okay.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, I mean, that's and you know what? It's the same space that we make for human error, and that space is called grace. So that's the space where where we understand that we are humans. I mean, I think what we keep forgetting sometimes, oftentimes, is that we are humans. Human meets human, right? And I come to the table with 1,000 expectations, none of which you're aware of or in control of, and you come to the table with 1,000 expectations, none of which I'm aware of or in control of. And when we don't meet up 100% eHarmony match on our
Right.
expectations that we are unaware of, we find fault in one another and we tend to judge each other and we tend to discard people. And I've grown enough and learned enough and been through enough and I've done enough damage and I've been damaged enough by people, scarred and have scarred enough to know that it is such an imperfect system and that it doesn't leave room for relationships to have longevity, to have vulnerability, to have trust and honesty. And when I think about my relationship with God and how much He has sustained me and restored me, resuscitated the relationship when I gave up on it.
Yeah.
Like I literally,
Yeah.
we quit on God and He continues to give us breath for it. It reminds me that I have to provide more room for human error. I have to actually provide more room for error than I can
Really.
for more space for error than I can for the quality of relationship. Granted, relationships need to have standards. I'm not saying they shouldn't have standards, but what I'm saying is that even with those standards,
Right.
people will make mistakes. They will make bad decisions and they will have regrets. And we need to be willing to forgive and heal. We can only be responsible for our heart's response. We cannot be responsible for the mistakes that they make. But if we leave room for human error, ours and theirs, there's space for grace in a relationship, and it will allow the relationship to get the years that
Right.
you and your
I think
husband
the
have.
space that you're talking about, I heard it once referred to as the expectation gap. That's really what you're talking about. I expected for you to do this, and you felt
Absolutely.
short of that expectation. And so, in that expectation gap, it is frustration, it is fear, it is anger, it is like all those things live there. And if you don't acknowledge the fact that,
Yeah.
one, the expectation gap is real and there's no way to close it, you have to fill that expectation gap with grace, right? It has to be filled with grace. Any
Absolutely.
relationship you're in, even our relationship with Christ. I know when my cousin was diagnosed with cancer and he passed, there was a huge expectation gap. I mean, but listen, there was a vast gap between my expectation and how things ended. And I mean, I found depression in that gap. I swam in that gap with depression, frustration, turning away from God, ready to end my relationship with the Lord, like because of that expectation gap. And you have to remember things aren't always going to meet your expectation. But that is exactly what grace is for. And thank God for it, because just like I need to give someone grace, Lord knows I need plenty of grace. I need extra keeping of grace when it comes to dealing with me.
Girl.
Um,
Absolutely. And if you don't fill it with grace, I will tell you, it will fill itself with resentment, with bitterness, with depression, with hurt, with anxiety, with stress, with emotional eating, with low expectations in relationships, with quitting, with defeat. It will fill itself. So we have the responsibility, and we owe it to our heart to be responsible with how we respond to other people and how we respond to mistakes and failures and what we bring to the table. And when you talk about being love and light, part of the reason why I can be lighthearted and say, yeah, girl, I was raped in college and smile about it, it's not because it was a
right.
smiling affair, but it is because I'm so set free from the bondage of other people's mistakes or it's even circumstances that I even put myself in sometimes that I recognize were bad decisions. I'm free from the bondage of it, and I have filled my own gap with grace for myself.
Oh, yes, Sybil. That is so good.
It just, I mean, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be reckless sometimes. Sometimes I'm going to be confused, or sometimes I'm going to take chances that don't really add up. And I'm going to need to forgive myself And sometimes it's not about the other people. Sometimes it's really us forgiving ourselves and saying, you know what? That wasn't the smartest decision. I wish I had not done that, but I have. I did do that. And I thank God that I was able to learn and grow despite the
Right.
things that I felt were going to take me
We
out,
don't
and
start
just
at
keep it
perfection. I think
moving.
we sometimes treat ourselves and other people as if,
No.
okay, at some point you're supposed to get to this place of perfection, or you started from perfection and you've somehow messed that up. That's not how it works. We are living things, not just human beings. We are living things. And one thing that's true about all things that are living things grow. And and that means that growth is necessary, right? It
Yes.
means that wherever I started, it's not where I'm intended to
Yep.
stay, and it's not the best of me yet, right? Like I haven't gotten to the best of me yet. So I have to grow, and growing
Absolutely.
things change. So anytime there is a shift, a pivot, a mistake, a just downright bad decision, understanding that, not necessarily saying, walk into those bad decisions and, with your eyes wide open. But as you go through those things, understand that we're called to grow through that, right? Because we're living, we're growing, we're changing. And I think that is one of the things that is so authentic with you, that you are Sybil. You're not Sybil 2.0. You're not Sybil of the future. You are Sybil of today, this minute. You are the best Sybil that you can be. And tomorrow you're going to be better. And 3 months from now and 36 months from now, you will be better than the Sybil that we know now. But you aren't trying to give off this like, oh, I've arrived, I have no growing left. And I think that when you are in touch with how much growth you needed to get to where you are, and how much more growth you have left in you, I think that's what allows us to be just kind of open and transparent and vulnerable. Because I don't have to be perfect. I don't need to say I never made mistakes. I don't need to say, well, I felt strongly about something at one point, but now that I've had some experiences, I've kind of changed my mind, or I've realized that it's not what I thought it was. I didn't have the experience when I made that statement. Now I've lived a little. I tell my kids that all the time. I have a 21-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 16-year-old. And I tell them all the time, they think they just know stuff, girl. They know everything and we know nothing, okay? We, we just getting our advice out of
Right, right.
grab bag. I guess we haven't lived. We're just pulling stuff out the air. And when they don't get it, I can see there's just
Hilarious.
this, it's sincere. Them not getting it is sincere. My advice to them is always, you know what? Keep living. I know you believe that. And you like, they not fronting. They believe that foolishness. You know what? Live a little bit. I'm telling you, girl, live a little longer and then you'll get here. And I think that being okay with saying it's
Yeah.
possible that I don't know everything. It's possible that this thing I thought was going to work, or I thought this was the best way, but I realized now that I was wrong. I think that can only happen when you are good with you, when you know who you are, whose you are, and that your mistakes, your decisions, your success and failures don't define you. Now, we were defined at birth, right? We were defined at conception as children of God, as holy, as above and not beneath, right? As righteous. Those things we were defined as right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this is who I am. I am those things. That's my true
Yes.
identity. So it's okay that I made a mistake. It doesn't make me less, awesome because of that mistake. It just shows that I have more growth and that there's more grace that needs to be given. I love that you say give what you need. Speaking of grace, so even though, I guess she didn't have anything else to do, she runs her own business, right? She also has the podcast. She has the Great Girlfriends Conference. I know you guys coach. She's wife to an actual human being. I think that when people realize people are humans, that just throws a wrench in the whole system. She has actual little people she's responsible for. And even with all of
Right.
that, she was like, you know what? You know what I'm adding to my plate? Another podcast. I'm gonna add another podcast because I don't have
Crazy,
anything
right?
else to do. I'm just sitting here with all this extra time, Lord. So I'm gonna fill it with the Grace podcast. Now I know that not to be true. So how did you come to the decision to add another thing, right? You're already doing great work. If you
I
didn't
know.
do If you hadn't added this Grace podcast, lives are being changed by what you say. People are being encouraged. They're coming out of depression. They're getting help. They're going after what they want. They're becoming better friends. They are stepping out. They're able to see themselves at the table. Can I tell you that as a result, direct result, Sybil, I want you to take this as a direct result of the work that you and Brandis do with the Great Girlfriends podcast and the Great Girlfriends conference. It was the first time I saw that I deserved to be at a table. Do you understand that? That is
Wow.
that has changed my. I'm
Oh
trying
my
not to
goodness.
cry.
That's so
It has changed my
powerful.
life. It changes the way that I go
Wow.
after what I believe I've been called to do. And let me tell you this, I always believed I had a calling. I knew I had a talent. I knew I had skills, but I still was like, oh, I need an invitation to the table, or I'm not really sure if I need a seat at the, like, maybe I could just send a note to the table. I don't really, right? I don't have to sit at the table, but listening to the podcast, I always recommend everyone go ahead and jump in where you are now, whatever the episode is now, where you hear this, but go back and start listening from episode 1, because people can see you living out that faith. And that is enough to change. Like, it has literally changed my life. This book I'm promoting, Power Principles, Courageous Living, I tried writing a book before, but I didn't want to write a book about my story, right? I just wanted to, I was like, oh, I'm gonna write a little book. It's gonna be so cute. But I didn't want to share my story. And my best friend, Olivia, you know Olivia. Hey, Olivia. She's been telling me to write this story forever. And I just was like, no,
Hey,
I'm good,
girl.
fam. Because I was like, I don't need to write a book. People don't need to hear my story. Like, nobody needs to hear this. This is like, that's good. And I understand I've been through some things, but people don't need to hear it. After that conference, that was it. I was like, oh, friends, y'all ain't even ready. I'm like, I don't know what these ladies done started. I don't know if they know they done started a fire over here, but your girl is about to set the world ablaze. And I can honestly say that was the pivotal moment.
Wow.
Great Girlfriends, that conference. I remember being in the hotel, boo-hoo crying. Listen, Olivia and Alicia are looking at me like, what is happening? Why are we having an emotional breakdown? And I'm like, because I feel this call on my life. And I feel like since we're here with this conference with these women, I can't not do it. But I'm so scared. So all I can do now is just cry like, man, coming to this conference, they done started something. Now I can't take a couple steps back. Like, I have a responsibility to the people I'm called for, right? Our responsibility to our calling is to the people we're called for. You were called for me. I can't speak for anybody else listening, okay? I can't speak for another soul on this planet. Sybil, the call on your life, he is so specific and he just cares so much about me. That call, he rang your phone. That was about Taquisha Shantae Patterson, the girl from the projects. That calling, that anointing, that was for her. And so now I'm here. And so you're already doing great work. You are already busy. You're already walking into this calling. Why are you still answering other calls? How did you get to this Grace podcast?
I love you, Courage. I love you so much. I love you so much because I can actually think back and remember the video that you posted in the Great Girlfriends group after the conference when you were crying and testifying. I want to say this was 2 years ago. And Brandis and I watched it over and over and we were just so blown and we were like, just kind of in awe, because we're just flowing with God. We're just going on the assignment. We're just doing as we're instructed. And that's sort of been the MO. After I decided that I was going to pursue purpose, I said, well, what happens if I pursue purpose over everything? How does that work? And once we made that decision, all of these other opportunities for the purpose, our purpose to be utilized, my purpose to be utilized, became made available. And so I was a person who would answer, I would answer yes, if people called and asked, but I wasn't curating it outside of the things that other people were asking for me, right? Because that was me hoping that other people's interest would validate the fact that I needed to be there. So that was a secret sub story that was happening, probably in You're One of the Great Girlfriends. I said, well, if they invite me, I'll come, but I'm not going to create it myself, because that would mean me promoting, and that would mean me having to take ownership of something that I wasn't ready to own. And God started to deal with me on that, and deal with the fact um, that there's a unique calling specific to each one of us that is essential to this human ecosystem. And that when we forsake it, when we put it on hold, when we delay it, we're delaying someone else's resuscitation. And so when I go back over the times, again, like I say, my heart was resuscitated in that I instead of me wanting to take my life, I desired life. It was just such a complete change from the way I approached every day. Um, me not knowing how to live became me saying, what is life truly about? How can I live? And so that came from other people answering the call on their life and moving past their fears and putting their stories on the table and making their hearts available to me. So when I thought back over that, it reminded me that I'm responsible for other people, not just for myself and my direct family and my cousins and, my direct sphere of influence, but there are people in this world beyond my physical touch that still need to feel my reach. They need, because they're looking to feel God. And if I'm a possessor of God, if I carry his heartbeat, then I am responsible for distributing it globally. It doesn't mean I have to physically travel the world, but I have to think about the entire world as I navigate each day. So when God came to me, in my private time, um, when God reminded me that there was more that I needed to do, I was trying to find time, courage. I was like, how, where, when? Because I look booked. How does this work? All of a sudden, time became available and an assignment became known. The Lord was like, you're going to start another podcast, and it's going to be focused on spiritual development. And I was like, but I'm not a preacher. So how am I going to talk about Jesus, and I'm not ordained and I'm not a preacher. He said, just talk about our relationship, plain and simple. And I said, oh, I could do that. I can talk about our relationship all day long, because I am so passionate about the relationship we share. And that was it. And well, no, let me not say that. That wasn't it. That came in February. I didn't release the podcast until November, because I was trying to make it perfect, or late October. I was trying to make it perfect, and I was trying to make sure it was branded properly and that it would be big when I released it, because I was like, it has to be big, because if I'm going to do it, it's got to be big, because I do big. That's what I thought. Um, and I kept telling myself that I got to make it really voluminous for God, because God is big and blah, 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 blah. Not not really co-creating with God, me trying to go ahead of God and help God. And so, we went through a boxing match, God and I, where he had to back me into a corner, and he was like, walk with me, not ahead of me, not behind me. Walk with me, and walk with me and listen to me, follow my instructions, and let it be what I'm intending for it to be. And that's totally different. So I did. I came up with the content. I started to record. I was very nervous, shaking in my boots. I want to clarify to the world, now I'm not a preacher. I'm just a lover of God. And, if you love God, you can talk about God too. Because I wanted to back the preachers off of me. I wanted to back the ministers off of me, and I wanted people just to stop expecting a sermon, but just expect a conversation about God. I was really just trying to protect myself, and God was like, "Why are you doing all that? Like, who asked you? No one asked you any of that." So, he was
Ooh,
dealing with me
baby.
episode by episode, but um, saying it to say, he made space. He put the assignment in front of me, and I was open to the assignment, and I said yes. It took a while for me to step into it, because I was trying to walk ahead of God and make it what I thought it should be instead of what God was asking of me. And again, after that boxing match and me coming out of that corner, I resolved that walking with him was going to be he was right, I was wrong. Okay. And I needed to be obedient and press into it. And then shortly after that, he said, "Now I need you to start this growth circle for women, and I need you to call it Brave." And I'm like, "Why? What? Why? What?" And if when you ask God a question, he will answer, not in a way that has to explain his thinking, but in a way that gives you the assurance that what you're doing is in line with what he has for you. So it was just for me, moving in one opened up the door to the next, and it opened up an opportunity for me to display God's love and light. That is my full purpose, to display love and light around the world. It gave me that opportunity to talk about God in a more fluid way, as much as I want, however I want, whenever I want, and allowed me to really express my heart for God and to help other people and encourage other people in that same way, but also help us as Christians to pursue our holy ambition, like really be ambitious, our holy ambition, our faith ambitions, without questions of whether or not God will be there with you. Because as I grow, people get to see that I'm trying everything that if God says it, I want to go after it. When he told me it was mine, I just need to say yes to it. I didn't need to, I didn't need to start processing it and planning it, which is what I'm trained to do by my career. I just need to fall in love with the vision and separate myself from the idea that I need to take 10 steps on the first day. That's not what he is. He just said, just say yes. Say yes to the vision. Say yes to that. Start dancing with the vision. Start dreaming with the vision, and let the process come to you, but not start processing. So that helps me out a lot.
It is so crazy. I listened to the podcast, and I say amen to the podcast all the time. And I don't mean the Grace podcast. I mean Great Girlfriends. I started there saying amen to you all the time. So it is so funny to hear you say, you felt like you kind of needed to put out all these disclaimers. I'm not a preacher. I'm not a minister. I'm not ordained. And the truth is, I feel that way too. But when we say things like that, it's implying that there is something that makes you qualified to give the word of God other than your relationship with him. And that is just not the truth. The only thing, right? The only thing is the relationship. Doesn't matter if you're ordained, if you went to seminary. I say that from a completely hypocritical place. Okay. I am such a hypocrite. I'm telling you that. But somebody will say, "Are you ordained?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, but I got my papers online." Like, I don't want anyone to think that I think that I should be out here teaching Bible. So I'm gonna say right now, before you find out on the streets, I'm a complete hypocrite. So I definitely am, because you feel that way. You feel like, oh, I'm so unqualified to carry this message. I'm so unqualified to lead people in their faith walk, or to have people come along this journey with me. And that's really why it is you. That's why you were chosen, right? Because there's so many people out there who feel like, well, in order for me to have a real relationship, in order for me to have this faith walk, I also have to kind of go about it in this way. I need to go to seminary. I need to get this spot. Like, it's not about that. It is about the relationship. So I'm so glad, Sybil, that you said yes to the Grace podcast. But I think it's everything, baby girl. It's everything. You hear me?
Thank you, Courage.
It is everything.
An indicator, Courage, sometimes of God. So, I just sit back and I'm always like, all right, Lord, you have your way. My life is a vessel. So you just run through it. My kids are yours. My husband, all of it, everything is yours, Lord. So just run through it, go wild, go crazy in every corridor of my life. And so when I started the Grace podcast, and I didn't even truly promote it. I just kind of put it out and set it out there. I was like, let me see. I checked the numbers probably a month after. And a month after, I was like, oh my goodness, people are actually listening to this. This is wild. I mean, I was out, and I feel like God was giving me that side eye from heaven, like, for real, you really what, like, you thought I was just gonna let it sit in a box somewhere, but I really was just kind of blown because it let me know the need. The need is there, Courage. The need is for your mission. The need is for every listener who's on, who's listening to this podcast. You're listening because Courage had literally the bravery, the courage to pursue her mission out loud and to do it publicly and to take the risk of you feeling like she's not qualified but not caring because she knew that
Right.
God called her and qualified her. And so that's for every single person that's out there. It to remind you how necessary you are. I know sometimes it's easy for us to sometimes go to jobs where we don't feel we're essential. We wonder why we're there. It don't match our purpose, but it brings in a check, etc. And so a lot of us will go through life feeling like we are useless or that we are not of good use to God. But it's a lot. Every bit of trial, tribulation, every high, every low, sunrise and sunset, your story, every piece of it, every detail, every facet, every character in the story, the entire plot line is essential to someone else's growth. And when you place it out there publicly, as an example, as a display of what God has done or can do and is doing, because I'm not a finished work, and I'm certainly Courage. I know you're
Ooh, but
you're
oh, I am not.
you know what I'm saying? But when you put it out there as an example, people get to grow with you and people get to start to plant their own seeds. And I think that it makes space for our children to have something to hold on to. It makes space for people in this world who are choking. There are people choking off of the things that are happening in life. And when I get a chance to hear, for example, I volunteer with Covenant House, and I might hear from some of the youth that are playing this podcast. It really blows my mind because I think about all the times that I said, well, what if it's not good enough? And what if I missed out? But I'm looking at these homeless youth who need hope and they need to set expectation. And I'm praying that something that I say or Brenda says or something that's said on the Grace podcast or something that Courage says on Courageous Living will help transform the life of the person that's listening, plain and simple. So every single listener of your podcast needs to sit down today and just start with, I believe my purpose is right. So I you don't have to know it and know it for sure because sometimes it's confusing. I believe my purpose is this. I feel like my purpose is this because I feel so passionate when I deliver this. When I give this, I feel my heart exploding, right? Like I feel like I am completely in line with God when I'm pouring this out, when I'm giving this. I would give this in the middle of the night or at 12 noon. I would give this
Mhm.
in every time zone. Like this is what I would give and do if I had my way all day, every day. These are the type of people that this can help. And you can write it out. This will help women. It'll help the moms. It'll help teens. It'll help pregnant girls. It'll help single moms. It'll help drug addicts. It'll help CEOs. It will help pastors. It will help PKs. Whomever you think it will help. Those are the people that you'll find yourself speaking to at a certain point. And if I had my way, this is how I would put my purpose to work on this earth. I might write a book. I might start a podcast. I might start a blog. I might do, have a speaking engagement. I might start dinners. I might, write a cookbook. I might start some form of technology. I might, decorate homes. I might have a cleaning service. I might be an accountant. Whatever that is, be willing to write it out. And then just and this is not saying you're doing it today. This is just saying if I were to do it, this might be how I do it. I don't know. Maybe, just give yourself the idea, to give yourself the opportunity to just dreamcast a bit and just explore it a bit, write it out and say, I mean, maybe if I do it, this will be how I would do it. And then you just next thing you know, you are all over the pages of that book or that piece of paper. Your mind, you are co-creating with God, and he starts to download for you.
Oh,
Yeah, girl,
yes.
did you think about this? Did you think about this? Can you imagine yourself here? Oh my goodness. And if I were doing it, this is what I might wear. This is what you know what I'm saying? I might have on pink. I might have on yellow. I might have on ruffles. My hair might be blonde. My hair might be short, or I might be here. And I picture myself doing it this way. And I picture myself giving money here. And if I did it, it would set these people free. Like just really just get curious about it and play around with it from this podcast forward. I'm really asking for every single listener to take a moment and just sit with it. Don't plan it, don't overthink it. Just sit with the idea that your purpose might have an impact, and just ask yourself, if I were to plant my purpose, what would it look like? And then you can ask yourself, if you want to go further, then you start to ask yourself, who are the people in my life that can assist me with this? Because you don't need new people. You just need to activate the ones you already have. So who are the people in my life that can assist me with this? And don't say how much money, because you don't need money. You need to be creative with resources. So what are the resources that I currently have that can be used to activate my purpose? We're not looking for new resources. We have everything we need. We just need to work with what we have. You ever seen your grandmother go in the kitchen, find salt, flour, pepper, come out with biscuits, and you're like, what? How did she make a full meal out of those cabinets? When I looked in the cabinets, I was hungry. When she looked in there, she had all the ingredients for a feast. You feel what I'm saying? She had everything she needed. So she didn't go looking outside the kitchen. She just went in the kitchen and started cooking. So we need to stop looking outside of the kitchen, get in the kitchen and start cooking up some results. You feel what I'm saying?
Girl, that was so good. So this is what we're going to do. I am going to create a form, just like a little printable with all the things that Sybil is challenging us to sit down and think about. And you'll be able to get that in the show notes, because I want you guys to take that so serious. You are here listening to this podcast for a reason. So the time is now. Sybil, I have one last question for you, which I feel like you kind of did already, but Sybil, how do you define courageous living?
You know, I think curious ambition. When I think about courageous living, I think about curious ambition. You know, something hits my heart and I just get curious about it and I start pursuing it. Just going after it, not even with eyes wide open, sometimes completely blinded, but open to the idea that my curiosity is going to take me somewhere. And that requires courage, because you don't always feel fearless when it's time to move. But if you feel curious enough about something, you will go after it enough until you find what you're looking for. So I believe courageous living is really being in full possession of curious ambition and really going after it. I feel like that's what has given me life. I feel like that's what has allowed me to co-create with God and to participate in his plans for me. And I feel like that's what's opened me up to people that have been such a gift to me, like you and many, many other thousands of women like around the world that I just feel so gifted to know and to be a part of your world and learn from each one of you all and take away something that I can use to activate something greater in my life. So I think curious ambition has been a huge piece of my growth and my continued elevation for sure.
That was so good. Sybil, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and just give all that Sybilness to this courageous living community. I thank you so much. You are a blessing. I thank God for you on a regular basis, girl. I really, truly do. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. And thank all of you for listening. I can't wait to share this podcast and get you on to talk about your book on the Grace podcast. So we got some work to do, Courage.
Yes, we do. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I want to tell you guys about one thing. The Mosaic Women Network 3rd annual girls trip to New York City. The details are going to be in the show notes. It includes your tickets to the Great Girlfriends Conference, along with hotel accommodations and great sessions with myself, Olivia, the brand designer, and Alicia D of MG Body Confidence Movement. I also want you guys to take a look at the Struggle Exchange. Y'all know that's my nonprofit. We are all about putting an end to depression, suicide, abusive relationships by educating and equipping young people to be leaders and catalysts for change on their campus and across the globe. For more information on how you can get involved, check us out at struggleexchange.org. If you haven't gotten a book yet, what are you waiting on? www.couragemelina.com, where we embrace courage as a lifestyle. Until next time, guys. Love you.